You have heard this specific number casually tossed around. People use it as an automatic trivia reflex at dinner tables. Human life in the Stone Age ended at 30 years old. This statement is technically accurate. It is also a massive mathematical lie. Untangling this specific deception is one of the most satisfying jobs for modern bone detectives. The popular image this number forces into your brain is incredibly vivid. You picture a 30-year-old hunter dropping dead. You imagine brittle bones. You see gray hair. You envision collapsing lungs and ruined joints. You assume everyone else in the tribe looked at this early physical collapse as a perfectly normal event. Your brain is wrong. They did not age like dogs. The actual machinery driving that low number is not old-fashioned aging. The reality is far darker. It is infinitely more fascinating. So, let us tear this number apart. Let us look at the raw biology hiding inside. The massive confusion comes from a blind spot. People fail to separate life expectancy at birth from life expectancy at a later age. These are two violently different statistics. Modern minds mash them together. The result is total historical distortion. Life expectancy at birth is nothing but a ruthless average. It traps every single human born into a group. The baby who dies in its very first hour gets tossed into the exact same equation as the elder. The final age at death is averaged across the whole tribe. This specific math is incredibly vulnerable to infant mortality. The earliest years of human life act like an anvil on the data. Death at year 1 pulls the entire average down into the dirt. It crashes the numbers. This crash happens even when a massive chunk of the tribe survives childhood. Those survivors went on to live genuinely long lives. They lived long by any standard. But the math buries them. You are looking at a statistical ghost. You are letting a broken number erase the actual lived experience of our ancestors. Let us run a simple thought experiment. It exposes exactly why this hard math matters. Imagine a tribe of 10 people. 5 of them go into tiny graves before they reach age 5. This is a survival bottleneck. It is a brutal physical gauntlet. It defined ancient populations. It defined recent history too. The other 5 survived. They beat the gauntlet. They lived to 70. What is the average life expectancy at birth for this exact group? You add up the numbers. 5 deaths at age 2. 5 deaths at age 70. You divide by 10. The result is roughly 36 years. Look closely at that number. It is completely hollow. Half the tribe lived to 70. Nobody dropped dead of old age at 36. The number 36 is a statistical phantom. It describes the lived reality of absolutely 0 people in that tribe. This exact illusion drives the famous Stone Age myth. The 30-year average is dragged down by tiny graves. It is not driven by adults dropping dead in their prime. The accurate metric is life expectancy at 15. This measures biological reality. It tracks how long a human lived after surviving the survival bottleneck. Bone detectives calculate this metric. The picture flips completely. If you beat the bottleneck, if you hit 15, you had a rock-solid chance of hitting 60. You could easily see 70. You did not die young. Why did so many children die? The answer holds a dark paradox. It shatters the myth of human progress. You assume history is a straight line of improvement. You think older means sicker? The brutal truth is exactly the opposite. Infectious disease was the ultimate killer. But the actual threat flipped completely as we evolved. Mobile bands of ancient hunters actually had breathing space. They moved constantly. They lived in tiny groups. This deep isolation acted as a massive shield. It protected them from the pathogen wildfire that devastated later human empires. Massive epidemics like smallpox, measles, and tuberculosis choke modern populations. They require packed bodies to survive. A disease needs fresh hosts. It starves if it burns through an isolated tribe too fast. The transmission chain simply snaps. The virus dies in the dirt. Then we invented farming. We built permanent settlements. We packed ourselves into cramped mud huts. We traded breathing space for food. The brutal consequences hit us instantly. Contaminated water from human waste poisoned our children. Living shoulder to shoulder with livestock unleashed entirely new microscopic killers. The agricultural revolution actually engineered the perfect slaughterhouse for infectious disease. We created the exact cramped conditions you navigate in a crowded modern subway. But we did it completely without plumbing. Pathogens moved right in. They burned through human bodies. They flourished in the very centers we built to survive. Settled civilization was a massive biological trap. Childbirth was the second massive killer. This biological tax hit two targets simultaneously. Mothers, infants. Maternal death in the ancient world was a staggering biological bet. You look at the raw math. A woman faced a 1 to 2% chance of dying every single time she gave birth. That sounds like a remarkably small threat. But women in these tribes did not roll those dice just once. They rolled them constantly across their entire reproductive window. Imagine giving birth 8 times. A conservative 1% risk compounds violently. It builds a lifetime death sentence that easily crosses 5 to 8%. That means 1 in 15 women, sometimes 1 in 12. They walked into pregnancy knowing it might literally be the end. The physical causes of this slaughter were brutally consistent across all human tribes. Heavy bleeding drained them out on the dirt floor immediately after delivery. Silent fever burned through their blood days later. Then there was the mechanical trap. The infant got stuck. Its sheer size created a physical wall inside the pelvis. No amount of ancient wisdom or physical force could unlock that trap. Only modern steel can fix it. Finally, hidden blood pressure spikes triggered fatal seizures. These invisible killers remain dangerous even with modern doctors. In the ancient dirt, they were completely untreatable. They crushed a massive chunk of humanity before they ever saw old age. Infant death operated on a scale that completely shatters our modern comprehension. You cannot easily process this sheer volume of loss. Look at the raw estimates. 30 to 50% of all children went into the cold dirt before they ever reached adulthood. The absolute deadliest window was the first 2 years of life. Birth complications struck first. Then came the invisible pathogens. These babies were born with a massive immune blind spot. They had no vaccines. They had no chemical shields. Malnutrition starved them during winter famines. Their bodies simply lacked mass. Think about fragile, tiny lungs trying to survive without a modern ventilator. Think about cold air. Think about raw human fragility. It produced a death rate that looks like a biological massacre today. This specific slaughter of the young is the single heaviest weight dragging down that famous 30-year average. You assume ancient people simply aged faster. You assume their bodies just burned out quicker. They did not. The toddlers, dying by the thousands, were not living shortened adult lives. They were not living adult lives at all. Then we must confront the third major killer: human hands. This topic ignites a vicious, ongoing debate among modern bone detectives. Some researchers look at the cracked skulls. They look at the shattered bones. They argue that tribal warfare and sharp, blunt force took a massive toll on prehistoric men. Look at the extreme estimates for specific tribes. 10 to 20% of all adult males died violently. They did not die of old age. They died fighting. They were hunted by their own kind. But this is absolutely not a universal truth. Other experts fight these massive numbers. They argue these specific bloody dig sites are extreme outliers. They do not represent the average ancient hunting camp across the whole globe. Violence was definitely a brutal reality, but it was not always the primary shadow stalking our ancestors. Environmental hazards formed the fourth massive killer. Think about a freezing night. Think about a wild animal attack. Think about falling down a steep cliff. You face a broken bone today. You take a quick hospital trip. You get a hard cast. You heal completely. The same broken bone trapped our ancestors. A snapped leg triggered a biological chain reaction. The ultimate missing weapon was the invisible shield. We call it antibiotics. It is impossible to overstate how completely this single chemical cheat code changed human survival. Modern brains cannot grasp this. A simple scrape started a brutal countdown. The wound filled with dirt. You watched the red swelling spread up your arm. The fatal fever hit your brain within days. The dominoes fell fast. Today, cheap pills stop that exact chain reaction in hours. Back then, a tiny thorn could end your life. Infections from childbirth wiped out mothers. Lung fluid from a simple winter flu drowned the elderly. Bacterial storms turned minor cuts into absolute death sentences. This microscopic war raged uninterrupted for the entire history of our species. It only stopped in the middle of the 20th century. The massive gap between ancient death and modern life is not a story of human weakness. Ancient bodies were not biologically inferior. They were not fragile machines. They possessed raw physical endurance. They simply lacked the specific chemical tools to fight microscopic invasions. They fought the exact same threats you face today. They just fought completely unarmed. So, what actually happened to the people who survived the childhood gauntlet? What did getting old really look like in the ancient dirt? The raw physical evidence is absolutely undeniable. Look closely at the dug-up skeletons of those who beat the biological odds. You will see the exact same physical wear and tear that breaks down modern elderly bodies. You will find worn teeth ground flat by a lifetime of chewing tough roots. You will spot healed broken bones. You will see the crumbling, thinning architecture of deep old age. Look at living tribal groups hunting in the Amazon or trekking across African plains right now. You will consistently find elders living deep into their 7th decade. Sometimes they hit 80. These older individuals are not useless burdens dragging the tribe down. They are the ultimate survival tools. They are a 70-year-old storyteller. They hold the mental maps to hidden water during a lethal drought. They hold the political power. Above all, they hold the children. This brings us to one of the most powerful concepts in human history, the grandmother hypothesis. Think about your own grandmother. Think about how she feeds, protects, and teaches. Humans are incredibly weird mammals. We are one of the very few species strictly built to keep living decades after we stop having babies. Why? Because an older woman in an ancient tribe provided a massive, undeniable survival advantage. She gathered crucial food. She guarded the fragile toddlers. She passed down ancient survival codes. Her sheer physical presence kept her grandchildren alive. That biological boost was so massive that human evolution hardwired an extended old age directly into our DNA. Nature is ruthlessly efficient. Evolution absolutely refuses to build biological traits that never get used in reality. If every single ancient human just dropped dead at exactly 30, this evolutionary anchor would never exist. There would be absolutely zero biological pressure to build a human body capable of surviving to 70. The very existence of grandmothers destroys the myth completely. Their ancient role proves that long human lives are not a modern medical invention. We were always built to get old. We misunderstood the entire historical picture. For decades, the smartest experts looking at ancient skeletons were completely wrong. They wiped out the actual longevity of our ancestors. Here is exactly why it happened. The biological markers used to determine a dead person's age eventually fail. Bone detectives look at fused joints. They study the heavy wear on a jawbone. They examine microscopic bone scars. But this internal timeline is incredibly flawed. It is a broken biological clock. Once a human body crosses middle age, these physical markers blur together. Telling a 45-year-old skeleton apart from a 65-year-old skeleton is an absolute biological nightmare. The scientists hit a massive blind spot, so they took a shortcut. They simply compressed everyone over 50 into one massive, vague category. They labeled them all as old adults. They stopped looking closer. This crude grouping crushed the historical truth. If your ancient burial ground holds individuals who live to be 70 or 80, but your science forces them into a generic 50-plus box, the final math crashes. You artificially slash the true length of adult lifespans. You shrink a wide, diverse reality of old age into a tiny, inaccurate box. Look at the most famous skeletal collection in this entire field. The Libin site in Ohio holds Native American remains dating roughly to 800 CE. Scientists picked these bones apart for decades. The initial analysis fit perfectly into the popular myth. The numbers showed a brutally short lifespan. Almost nobody seemed to survive past their late 40s or 50s. Then, modern science looked again. They dragged those same bones back into the lab. They used sharper tools to read the broken biological clock. The picture completely shattered. That massive, vague, older adult box actually contained a heavily hidden truth. A huge chunk of the tribe had survived much longer than the original scientists claimed. The old bones belonged to genuinely old people. This specific mistake serves as a massive warning. The Libin site is not an isolated error. It is a recurring nightmare for the entire field. Across multiple burial sites analyzed since the mid-20th century, the exact same pattern repeats. Early demographic counts constantly underestimated the genuinely elderly. Better physical tests constantly reveal an older, tougher, and significantly longer-lived population. They were always there. We simply lacked the vision to see them. Look at modern studies tracking living tribal hunters. Scientists like Michael Gervin and Hillard Kaplan tracked the Hadza. They watched the ache of Paraguay. They analyzed the Hiwi. They found a brutally consistent pattern across the globe. Death hunts heavily in the first few years of life. Then the biological threat plummets during adolescence. You survive your youth. You reach your prime reproductive years, and your survival curve shifts. The aging curve mirrors modern industrialized humans perfectly. It is just shifted higher because they lack a modern hospital. Their hard research exposed a massive statistical secret that demands your attention. It is the modal age of adult death. This is the single most common age at which a tribal adult actually stopped breathing. It completely bypasses the mean average dragged down by tiny graves. This is the 70-year norm. They died at 70 to 72. That is the single most statistically common outcome. If you survived the brutal bottleneck of childhood, you did not drop dead at 30. You did not collapse at 40. You marched deep into your 7th decade. This reality forces a violent comparison with early agriculture. You assume farming saved humanity. You believe civilization brought instant physical health. The bones prove you wrong. The shift to crops was a massive biological disaster. Look at the skeletons of the very first settled farmers. You will instantly see shrinking bodies. You will spot rotting teeth. You will find massive physical damage written directly into their bones. In many farming tribes, child death rates actually exploded compared to their hunting ancestors. This was the Neolithic mortality crisis. The farming trap destroyed human health. Civilization did not instantly cure us. The simple story of linear progress is a massive lie. We traded raw physical health for grain. You must completely separate isolated tribes from the massive disease explosions of later history. A prehistoric hunter faced an entirely different biological reality than a peasant trapped in crowded medieval gutters during an active outbreak. Catastrophic disease waves wiped out millions. They turned thriving settlements into absolute ghost towns. These acute biological disasters stacked heavily on top of normal tribal death rates. Lumping all these violently different populations into one vague category called ancient humans completely destroys the historical truth. So why does this broken number survive? Why do you still fiercely believe the 30-year myth? It survives purely because of the arrogance of now. This specific number feeds a comforting lie. You desperately want to believe human history is a straight, perfect line marching upward out of the mud. The idea that ancient people simply dropped dead at 30 strokes your modern ego. It actively flatters the present by intentionally exaggerating the brutal misery of the past. You constantly use their supposed physical weakness to validate your own modern supremacy. You look at your smartphone. You look at your medicine cabinet. You feel biologically superior to your ancestors. You are absolutely not superior in any physical way. You just inherited a vastly better biological shield from modern science. This accurate reality completely shatters how you view what modern medicine has actually accomplished. The ultimate human achievement is absolutely not that we somehow stretched our maximum biological limits dramatically beyond what was previously possible. Long lifespans deep into your seventh decade were always hardwired directly into our raw biology. The real victory is much sharper and genuinely more remarkable. We built a biological safety net. We drastically reduced the proportion of humans failing at surviving the start line. We stopped invisible pathogens from systematically executing adults. We stopped the brutal physical tax of human childbirth. We stopped tiny physical injuries from becoming absolute death sentences. We never pushed the ultimate roof of human lifespan upward. We instead spent centuries lifting the floor. This exact truth is infinitely more powerful and accurate than the mathematical lie it replaces. It is the ultimate story of our biological defiance. Our entire species fought aggressively across thousands of violent generations. We fought to build a shield. We fought to stop our own members from dying before they ever discovered their true biological limits. The number 30 definitely captures something real and tragic about ancient human existence. It simply does not capture what most people assume it captures. The actual story hiding underneath that broken statistic is incredibly dark regarding the details of childhood and childbirth. Yet it is incredibly bright regarding true adult longevity. It completely destroys the flattened cartoon version most people carry around inside their heads. Raw biology never changed.